Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun.
Mantra Guru Ajoto Shikha Gurugan Ta Charanayagi Korea Vandan Vandayaham Shri Guru Shri Paragaman Shri Gurun Vaishnavangshta Shri Rupam Shagadajatam Shahagana Raganatam Adangtang Shajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Shaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakangitang Scha Mansha Kalpatrubhya Chakrapashindu Bevachapadidanam Pavaneva Vaishnava Namo Namaha Omagana Timananda Sugyananjana Shalakaya Chukshu Onminatam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutala Shamati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurabani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavari Paschata Desha Tarine. In the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in our previous lesson, we were examining the connection between the 14th, the 15th and the 16th chapters. We were discussing Krishna's general description and enumeration of the Devi Sampat, the divine qualities, and the Ashuri Sampat, the demoniac qualities. We were discussing the significance of the word Abhijatasya, how these qualities are there at the time of one's birth, as a result of cultivating those in one's previous life, and one will take birth in the appropriate family to further cultivate those qualities, and the importance of Gavadan Sanskar, so that we can attract, by that purificatory ritual, we can attract a purified jiva into the family. We were examining Ugra Karma, and the general level of degradation of modern society in terms of its manifested demoniac qualities amongst the people in general, and amongst leaders, and amongst educators, and amongst influential people. And we described the destination of the, Krishna personally explained, Kshipami Yajasham Ashubham. Kshipami Yajasham Ashubham. Ashudeshiva yonishu, into inauspicious species of life. I personally, the tangahang drishatang krurang shangshareshu naradam, those with these qualities. So it's a very dangerous and a very precarious situation that one finds oneself in this material world, and the importance of developing divine qualities, reviving one's innate divine qualities by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Very important. Now let's take a look at the connection between chapter 16 and chapter 17. So at the end of chapter 16, Krishna explained, Ya Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya Vartate Kama Karata Nashashithim Avapnoti Na Shukam Na Param Gatim. He who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme destination. Na sa siddhim avapnoti, na sukham na param gatim. No perfection, no happiness, nor the supreme destination. So Arjuna asks, Ye shastra vidhi utsrija, yajante shadayan vitaha. Well, what if with faith, yajante, when he does his worship, yajante, and he has faith in a set of rules which are not mentioned in the scriptural injunctions, what is his position? So in that way, it's shastra vidhi utsrija, not mentioned in the established scriptures, but the person is following a set of rules that he has faith in. He or she has faith in, Shraddhayanvita, yajante. So what is his position if he's trying to do this as worship of God? Or what is his position? And Krishna responds, this is a very Very important question Arjuna is asking, because it's a very essential issue. Are there absolute rules? Are there absolute rules? Or can you just make up your own rules and follow them? And you've got your rules, I've got my rules. Or are there absolute rules that they're not made up by, they're not subjective, they're not just one person's, they're the standard for all. Well, an example, an analogy that Prabhupada uses, which is very useful in this connection to respond to this question. Are there absolute rules that everyone is compulsory has to follow? Or, no, you just make up your own, as long as you're following some rules. I think most educated people today would be in that as long as you've got some rules that you're following and you don't harm people and you follow, then it's okay. I've got mine. You're making up, and those who are atheists, they make up their own rules. Well, you can just do it like this and try and help like that, and that's okay. And this is the majority of people, educated people, actually would be falling into this category, that they feel that what they're doing is the right thing. They actually feel that what they're doing is the best way to live life. And they actually have their faith in that. And they do a bit of their family thing, a bit of their charity. They're honest, they don't steal, they don't cheat. They're considerate to their neighbors, or whatever their conception is, whatever of right and wrong. And they have faith that by living like that, I'll be properly situated. Or they may even think I'll be worshipping. Or at least I'll think it's correct. I have faith that this is the proper way to live. Otherwise they wouldn't be living like that. So most people actually fall into this category. So let's hear what Krishna responds. Is he going to say, yeah, whatever as long as you believe in me somehow or other, it's fine? Let's hear what he says. He says, Trivida bhavati shraddha dehinam shashabhavaja. He says that, regarding shraddha, yajante shraddhayan, they have faith. He says that Trividha bhavati, there's three types of faith. So, and this is very interesting that immediately this topic comes up, because we've been discussing up to this last three chapters, chapter 14, 15 and 16, we've been discussing about these Trividha, these Traguna, these three modes, and by this stage it's quite clear that, we were looking in chapter 16 that if you have the Raja and Tama influence, then Trividim narakashedam dvardam nashanam atmanaha. These are going to degrade you. And therefore, the three kinds are not all going to be equal, the three kinds of faith, because the three modes are not all equal. We saw that there's a major distinction between the mode of goodness and the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. The mode of goodness will urdhvam gachanti sattva ashto in chapter 14. Krishna in chapter 14, text 17, Urdhvam gachanti sattva sto. Those who are sattva sto, those who are in sattva gun, Urdhvam gachanti, they're going upward. They're going to be elevated in this life to a higher position, of a liberated position, where they're less bound up by the laws of this world. They're able to, in a liberated position, they're able to live a life of spiritual quality, and have great influence on the whole of the society, even in this life. They're in a very elevated position. Just like Srila Prabhupada, because of his consciousness, such an elevated consciousness, he has a man that has had such an impact on the lives of tens of thousands of people. So he's in he's like in an exalted position, where he's not restricted in a way a normal man is restricted, and the influence a normal man can have. Prabhupada was put into a position of great elevation. So, because this is a symptom of sattva guna, in an elevated position, can have such an impact on society. So, urdhvam gachanti. Sattva, in this life you can be elevated, you can go to the heavenly planets. Ultimately you can transcend the material world and attain the spiritual world. Chaktva deha madde tishtanti rajasaha, that one who's situated in the mode of passion will remain in the middle planetary systems, and jaganna ghumno britishto, those who are situated in the mode of ignorance Adho gachanti tamasaha. Adho gachanti, they will go down. Adho gachanti, they will go down. Tamasaha, to the lower worlds or to lower species of life. So we know already at this stage, it's been made quite clear. It's been made very clear to us, students and listeners, to the Gita Badesh, that there is quite a distinction between the Sattva and the Raja and Tamaguns. So naturally, Arjuna is asking the question, and Krishna is going to apply these principles to this concept of one's faith or one's belief system, one's spiritual. So it's very significant that this topic has come up in relation to evaluating right and wrong. And we're going to see obviously here that Krishna is going to explain that just having the faith is not sufficient. It is the modes of material nature that are influencing that faith. That's the status, that's the circumstances, that's the Purusha Prakriti Sto. That's going to be your circumstances in the material world, and you will have to accept the consequences accordingly, according to the modes of material nature that are influencing you, regardless of what you believe in. The nature of the faith that one has, which will be summarized, which will be explained, and there are various symptoms will also be analyzed, how we can identify what modes are influencing that faith, and one will be situated in that position in relation to their material conditioning, and can expect the appropriate bondage and consequences. Prabhupada's commenting, as long as one's faith is not completely in purified goodness, the faith is subject to contamination by any of the modes of material nature. The contaminated modes of nature expand to the heart. Therefore, according to the position of the heart in contact with the particular mode of material nature, one's faith is established. So, a very iconic statement of Srila Prabhupada in his purport to text 3 of the 17th chapter. The contaminated modes of material nature expand to the heart. So this is very, very fascinating explanation of the nature of our conditional existence. That even though we may have great faith and great belief, and we may think that my beliefs are kept safely within my heart internally, and there I keep them pure, and whatever I believe in deep within my heart, that's my spiritual safe place. But according to the Prabhupada's statement here, which actually helps us to actually understand what Krishna is explaining when he says Trividha Bhavati Shraddha, then Dehinam Sasabhavajam, which will manifest Sasabhavajam naturally according to the circumstances of the lifestyle that one is leading and the modes of material nature that are influencing one. One will establish, one will create, one will take shelter of a certain faith system. But that faith system, even though it's deeply experienced within one's heart, as Prabhupada is explaining, the material modes of nature also contaminate within the heart, so one can have a tamasic or a rajasic faith system. And actually, functioning in that faith system can be further entangling themselves in the lower modes of nature and have to suffer the undesirable consequences. Even though they may be somewhat considering themselves to be very committed, or a very ideal, or a very orthodox person in their practices or in their style of life. So, people are being controlled by the 3 kinds of material nature, and if they do not follow the Shastric injunction, then he will create something according to his position, either in the Tamagun, Rajagun or Sattvagun. He will create something, because they do not follow therefore the Shastric injunction, Shastric has to be like the Ashtra one has to accept like with discipline. That one follows these principles, because otherwise one will concoct, and that concoction is a result of the influence of the modes of material nature, and therefore can be contaminating. He's going on conducting himself under the influence of the same modes of nature, but those means superficially doing something in the tamagun, he will not be successful. He will not be successful. Yashashtra vidya mutshida vajate kamakarita. He's going on, Prabhupada is saying, conducting himself. But that is also under the influence of the same modes of material nature. Thus, we find different types of faith in this world, and there are different types of religions due to different types of faiths. There's different types of religions in this world, and we can analyze how many of those religions have been influenced by lower modes of material nature. Like, for example, even in the current world, we see aggression and violence between different religious groups, just like we have here in this part of the world between Islams and non-Islams, either Christians or Hindus. There's often very strong feelings of aggression and frequent clashes, and people are feeling that that's a religious. It's actually service. It's actually a religious thing to show that type of aggression. In the past, in the Christian world, there were the Crusades, where they're on the basis of reclaiming the holy city of Jerusalem from the hands of the Islamic in Turkish invaders. They were from Europe and from British Isles. The Crusades went to fight, and all of this aggression. So these are, we can see influence, even though they're thinking that this is spiritual. But we could see that there's an element there of lower modes of material nature, like pride and anger and harshness. We see that the superiority of the Gaudiya Siddhanta and the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are not based upon any type of political or violent type of revolutionary type of movement. The force of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan mission is simply the depth of the transcendental wisdoms of the Gauda Shikha. Mahaprabhu's Gaudavani to the Rup Shikha, his teachings to Rup Goswami, where the science of God is explained in such detail, such elevated topics of the flavors in which we can love God. And the sadhana, science of sadhana bhakti in the Sanatana Shikha, and the impersonal, defeating the impersonalist arguments in the Sarvabhauma Shikha and Prakasananda Saraswati. So these teachings of Mahaprabhu are so powerful that they're overtaking the entire of the humanity via the educational revolution. But in the past we can see a lot of aggression based on religious conceptions, a lot of violence, and even in present times, these types of things can be there. So a lot of tamasic influence can be there in people's religious conceptions. And also rajasic, that the idea of worshipping God for prosperity, that is there in Hinduism, worshipping the devas in order to attain Svargaloka. As Krishna describes in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, prapya punya kritam lokam, that the higher planets are achieved through the punya kritam, performing the pious activities. So in Hinduism, by performing varnasana dharma and performing the upasana kanda of Deva Upasana, worshipping demigods, one can actually achieve the higher planetary systems. But this actually is influenced with the material mode of passion, because these are temporary results, as Krishna further reveals in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Antavatu palam tesham tattavati alpamenasam. Antavatu pal, that the worship of the demigods, it gives a fruit, but that fruit is not, even though that extends over several lives, when one goes to the higher planets, that's extending over several lives. But that doesn't mean it's spiritual. As a very subtle type of material enjoyment, one will enjoy in their subsequent life. People think that's the same as a spiritual achievement, but it's not, because it's antavatu pal. That fall eventually will be exhausted, as Krishna further explains, as we've discussed in previous chapters, in the 9th chapter of Gita, text 22, that te tam bhunktva sagalokam vishalam, kshane punyamartha lokam vishanti, that kshay punya marcha lokam vishalam, having enjoyed the happiness on the heavenly planets, kshane punya, when their account of punya, ikshane, becomes exhausted, martya lokam vishanti, they again return from the higher planets back to the middle planetary systems. So, evam traya gata ka kama lamante. Therefore, Krishna explains that evam trayi dharmam anuprapannam, that those who trayi dharmam anuprapannam are following the Vedic through the Vedas, trayi dharmam, the three, by Vedic injunctions, and therefore they are worshipping the demigods and enjoying the heavenly planets and exhausting their punya and coming back to the earth planet. Gata gatam. Simply they achieve that coming and going. Gata gatam kama. Gata gatam. Death and birth. Kama. They repeat that. They achieve only repeated birth and death. So this is not spiritual. It's influence and motive, even though they have great faith. What to speak of these standard religious processes? Even people come up with all types of faiths in different aspects of life. Like, for example, people, they have faith in a marriage. They have a marriage. They have faith in a marriage. But they'll have a marriage, they want to have a marriage in a desert. Right? And they have faith that in the desert it'll be a spiritual, and they have their belief in that. So it's not based on any shastric. They just go out to the desert and with some priest, and they have faith that this is the way. Or in a balloon floating in the sky, or in an airplane, or in the underwater. You can read in the newspaper on occasion, people get married underwater with the scuba gear, and the priest is there. So they do these because they have faith in these things. They have faith in. I mean, you could take it as far as sports. People, it's on the level of faith in sport. In sport, following the sports heroes. Their worship, their pictures, their names are chanted. When their names are chanted, how did they used to in Mumbai? You're from Mumbai, yeah. They used to chant the name of Sachin Tendulkar. How did they chant it? There was a chant. How did it go? Sachin. Yeah. So I think that if they chant that, it's going to have some It's like there's energy. There's a, and they have a belief in that. If they chant, they come. They're all dressed up in the proper in the symbols and the colors, and they have the name, and they chant the name, and they. So there's a faith in this. There's a belief that there's some sort of this is good. This is I'm meant to do this. This is it's not just an entertainment. People it's an emotional thing. They cry. There's a joy. Sport is very attractive. There's so many of these people that they get such a thrill. And they have such belief in these people. In movie stars, they're so influenced by these people. So in this way, they come up with all types of faiths. And they're not all the same. As Prabhupada comments. Therefore, Krishna says here, Tri vidha bhavati shraddha dehinam shashavavaja. If one is cultivating his life like hogs and cats and dogs, the behavior is also like that, and remaining in that position. So his faith, and one who is advanced, who is worshipping the deity, having 3 times a bath, chanting mantra, they're not equal. Because if you're just, Prabhupada's saying here, it's not a matter of, we think that we're superior, but look at the activity and analyze where is the person, how is the person interacting with modes of material nature. So a person who's following the sattvic principles of rising, of tapa, rising early, of socham, remaining clean, of sama, controlling the mind, of tapa, of controlling dhamma, controlling the senses, kshantir, living arjavam, living a simple life. that looking at analyzing the person's lifestyle compared to a person who eats indiscriminately, just eats anything at any time, just whenever they smell something that without any considering, at any time of day, in any situation, without being clean, that works in such a way that, they're completely not even at all conscious of the effect that they're having on the whole of the planet by the type of work that they're doing, and they're their consciousness is completely immersed in the concept that they are a body as a particular person from an ethnic community. So the way they're situated in the modes of material, they don't wash, they evacuate many times, and they only wash once in a day, take a bath, they eat and all those things, and they only bathe once a day. And that person's faith, regardless of we can see that these people that, as Prabhupada says, let's read on. It's not possible that they're the same, because one is situated in a sattva guna and the other is situated in tamagun. Although the tamagun, the person who is in the darkness of knowledge, they have got their faith. They've got their faith, but that faith is in the lowest status of life. That faith will not help him for spiritual realization. For example, in Christianity, I've personally witnessed funerals where the body, where the soul has actually left the body, and that's quite some period in the past, perhaps a week or more, the soul has actually left the body, but the body is refrigerated, and then the body is dressed. This is described in Vedic literature, actually, that apranayasha dehasha ranjanam loka ranjanam, that a body decorating a dead body, apranayasha dehasha lokanam mandalam loka ranjanam, just to give some pleasure to the foolish people. So in India, a body is put on the like palanquin, bamboo and make one especially, they cut and make, and then the body's put there, and then they'll put flowers on that body, and then you look and say, oh, it looks so nice. So this decoration. But in the West, it's a whole industry, undertakers. And they know how to keep a body frozen so that it doesn't decay and not smelling, and they put in all other types of chemicals, and they put in chemicals to make the color of the skin, and they cut things and pull things back and stitch it up again to make it look like a smile, and they break the fingers and all those sort of things to put the body in some sort of metamorphosis rests, gets hidden and you can't move anymore, and all of these things. So maybe they take out the organs. I don't know, but anyway, there's a whole industry, and then they dress the body. Those people from the company, the undertakers, they visit the wives, they visit the family of the widow, and they get the best suit. They ask for a nice suit of the husband, and then they take that and they dress the body, and then there's a viewing, and then oftentimes the body is carried in a procession, and people walk behind. This is common, big famous people, a long procession, political leaders or celebrities or religious leaders or ethnic leaders, the procession of the body. So these things are, the body is, the soul is not the body. The body has nothing to do with the soul. Once it's gone, the body is simply meant for being eaten by dogs or being thrown onto the fire. So this type of respect and worship of the body is, we can see, it's not actually on the spiritual platform. It's not actually transcendental. It's a ritual which is influenced by the tamagun. And even though that's that type of practices is not actually help one progress in spiritual life. Let's have a look at an overview of the 17th chapter here. Krishna's explaining now the different types of faith, and so that's answered Arjuna's question that no, it's not just a matter of having faith in something, but according to the modes of material nature that the person is behaving in, they will have faith accordingly, and their belief system will be based on that, and they will be situated according to the modes of material nature and have to be bound in the material world accordingly, even though they have faith that they're going to be saved, so to speak. So Krishna now will go on to explain. We've discussed faith. He'll discuss worship and foods in the modes. We will take a look at some examples of that. Sacrifices, austerities, and charity in the modes, verses 11 to 22. and then chanting of the Om Tat Sat. Ultimately, chanting of the Om Tat Sat here is Krishna emphasizing that we have to absorb ourselves in the Sat, Shattushto, into the mode of goodness. And this is the important principle of human life that Krishna is recommending. And by chanting Om Tat Sat, by meditating on Om Tat Sat, in other words, by Krishna consciousness, one can completely situate himself in the mode of goodness. And we will conclude the class explaining some relevant verses that Prabhupada quotes in this connection from Srimad Bhagavatam. Let us hear Krishna's explanation of sacrifice in the modes of material nature, as he's explaining in verses 11 to 13 of chapter 17. Of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the direction of Scripture as a matter of duty by those who desire no reward is of the nature of goodness. But the sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride, O chief of the Bharats, you should know to be in the mode of passion. Any sacrifice performed without regard for the direction of Scripture, without distribution of prasadam, without chanting the Vedic hymns and remuneration to the priests, and without faith is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So a useful template we can use in this connection to help identify the condition of any particular circumstance or any particular person or any particular event, or attitude or approach, to help us identify what modes of material nature are influencing in that situation. We can use this template that if the activity is according to the Scripture and performed as a sense of duty, as Krishna mentioned, with no desire of reward. So just because it's my duty and it's according to the Scripture, that's an activity in Shattagun. And if it is according to the Scripture, but it's performed because I want to enjoy the result of that is an influence of the Rajagun, sacrifice. And that, of course, may be to a small degree or to a larger degree. There's a subtle desire to enjoy result, or it may be a very specific desire that I want to enjoy, and I'm performing the sacrifice for that reason. That's a sacrifice in the mode of passion. And if I'm performing a sacrifice which is not mentioned in the Scripture, then that is influenced by the mode of ignorance. So in that way, all these types of sacrifices are not equal, and we can use this template to help us evaluate the respective value of sacrifices in different situations and different circumstances. In verses 14 to 19, Krishna explains austerity in the modes. Let's read some of these verses. Austerity of the body consists of worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and superiors like father, mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and non-violence. Deva Dvija Guru Pragya Pujanam, as worshipping the Lord, the Brahmins, the spiritual master, the parents, Brahmacharyam, ahimsam, celibacy, non-violence, shariram tapa uchite. These are austerities in goodness of the body. In verses 14 to 19, Krishna is explaining body, words, and mind, austerity in the mode of goodness, from verses 14 to 16. Austerity in the mode of goodness for the body, words, and then the mind. And in verse 18, austerity in the mode of passion. And in verse 19, austerity in ignorance. And let's take a look at some of these statements that Krishna is making. He says in text number 14 that Deva Dvija Guru Pragya Pujanam Socham Arjanam, that worship of the Lord, the Brahmins, the spiritual master, the parents, and celibacy, brahmacharya, ahimsam cha, non-violence, shariram tapa uchite. This is austerity for the body in a mode of goodness. And text number 15 is austerity of words in a mode of goodness. Anudvegam karam bhakyam shatyam prayam hitam chaya. That austerity of speech consists of speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, and beneficial. That's satyam prayam, hitam, and not agitating to others. That's anudvegam karam bhakyam, that type of language. And regularly reciting Vedic literature, sadhya abhyashanam chaiva, vanmaya tapa uchite. This is austerity in goodness for the speech. And for the mind, take 16, mana prasada sham yatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava shangshati etat tapo manasam uchite. Satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, purification of one's existence are austerities of the mind. This threefold austerity, performed with transcendental faith by man, not expecting material benefit, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme, is called austerity in goodness. And then austerity in passion, penance performed out of pride for the sake of gaining respect, honor, and worship is said to be in the mode of passion. It's neither stable nor permanent. And penance performed out of foolishness, with self-torture, or to destroy or injure others is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Regarding austerity of speech, anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyam hitam chayat. Prabhupada is explaining in the purport that when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. That's anudvegam karam vakyam, that one shouldn't speak in such a way as to agitate or, not agitating to others, not in agitate. Anudvegyam karam vakyam, anudvegyam karam vakyam. One should speak in such a way that doesn't agitate others, not in an aggressive, confrontational type manner. And Prabhupada mentions one should speak to his students only in if such type of speech is required. However, in lecturing on this verse on an occasion, Prabhupada said, it is social convention that you want to speak truth. You speak truth very, very palatably, flattering. Don't speak unpalatable truth. But we are not meant for that purpose, social convention. We are a preacher, the servant of God. We must speak the real truth. You may like it or you may not like it. That a godless civilization cannot be happy at any stage. That is a fact. So Prabhupada's mentioning here that a preacher may speak in a cutting way, but that may be required in the service of the Lord. And then charity in the modes is discussed. 3 kinds of charity: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Sattvic charity in goodness with due consideration. That is the worthy place to give charity in the hands of a Brahmin and a Vaishnav, because they will employ whatever you give them in the service of the Lord. Rajasic means for the sake of name. Oh, people will say, I am so charitable. That's rajasic. And tamasic, one who does not know where the money is going, just like in the Bowery Street, the drunkard corners and polishes. The drunkard comes and polishes the motor car, and someone gives $5, and he immediately goes to drink. That means this charity is giving him the impetus for drinking. So if charity creates such a drunkard, that is very dangerous. He has to suffer, the man who is giving in charity. Considering the teachings of Krishna to Arjuna in chapters 14 to 17 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we can conclude that raising oneself to the mode of goodness is very important, and Krishna very much emphasizes this principle throughout this section of Bhagavad Gita. In lecturing, in his purports to these verses, Srila Prabhupada has commented in text 24 to chapter 16. One has to raise himself at least to the mode of goodness before the path to understanding the Supreme Lord can be opened. Without raising oneself to the standard of the mode of goodness, one remains in ignorance and passion, which are the cause of demoniac life. In lecturing in 1974 on the 17th chapter, Srila Prabhupada explains, without coming to the platform of Shatdagun, nobody can advance in spiritual life. That is a fact. Just like no one is allowed to enter the law college unless he is a graduate, this restriction is there, what he will understand about law. He must be a graduate. So similarly, first of all, one has to come to the platform, Shatdagun, then spiritual knowledge begins. So Prabhupada here is explaining that it is imperative that one, in order to establish oneself in spiritual life, overcome the influence of the lower modes of material nature, Raja and Tamagun, and particularly one can do this by overcoming the qualities of Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Tasmat Trayam Etat Trajet. These three things, Krishna explains, need to be overcome in order to establish oneself in the mode of goodness. And by following the Krishna consciousness principles, the four regular principles of spiritual life, then one can be in the mode of goodness, and one can be ensured that by chanting Hare Krishna, he or she will progress very swiftly to the transcendental perfection. Prabhupada continues to explain how to develop the mode of goodness. Since the present civilization is not very congenial to living entities, Krishna consciousness is recommended. Through Krishna consciousness, society will develop the mode of goodness. When the mode of goodness is developed, people will see things as they are. Even one is not in goodness, even one is in the darkest part of the quality of ignorance, still he can be immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. So this Krishna consciousness movement is directly offering the spiritual platform, which is above the mode of goodness. The quality of goodness will automatically be there. In this connection, Prabhupada quotes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, from Shukdev Goswami's teachings to the sages at Naimisharanya, where he's extolling the glories of the Bhagavat Panta, of the Sravanam Kirtanam process. Nitam Bhagavat Sevaya, by regular hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu, all of the inauspicious things are removed from the heart. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Noishtaki, Bhaktir Bhavati, and irrevocable devotion is established in one's heart. So the next verse, Sukdev Goswami explains that tada means then. So after establishing oneself in the Vaidhi Sadhana process of regular hearing and chanting, Krishna consciousness process, regularly chanting, japa, and hearing the science of Krishna, Jivanti sat mukaritam bhavadiyavartum shtani shtita shuddhikatam tanavan manobir. That by shtani shtita you remain situated wherever you find comfortable, and sruddhikatam by entering onto the sruddhikatam, the path of hearing, then tanvan manobir, with your heart hearing about me, then sat mukaridam bhavadiyavartum, hearing Bhavadiyavartum, my glories from the Satmukaritam, from the lips of a person who has imbibed the teachings of Krishna consciousness in their life, hearing Satmukaritam from the lips of that saintly person, Bhavadiyavartum, my glories, Stani Stata, city remaining wherever you are comfortable, Sruddhikatam Tanavan Manourabir, Yai Prayasho, by that endeavor, Yai Prayasho, Api Ajito, even though I am unconquerable, I become Api Jito, Api Taishtrilo, conquered by that process, even though I am otherwise unconquerable by any method. One who engages in the path of, one who becomes established on the path of hearing and chanting, that person, that's called Nitam Bhagavat Sevaya, tada, then Raja Tamabhav. The influence of Raja Tamabhav means the influence of Raja and Tamagun, which are Kama Lobha, as we mentioned in this concluding verses of the 16th chapter, that Kama Krodha Tata Lobha. So here particularly these same two qualities are mentioned. These are the symptoms of the Raja and Tamagun. Raja Tamabhava, Kama Lobha Dayas, etc. Chaye, particularly lust and greed. Chaita, Ater, Chaita is one's heart. Ater, these things, anavidham, are removed. That comes after the Nitam Bhagavat Sevaya, being regularly established in the hearing and chanting path, and Stitam Sattve. One automatically becomes situated in the mode of goodness and becomes prasiddhati, becomes satisfied, as Srila Prabhupada translates. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effect of nature's mode of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and becomes completely happy. So we can actually evaluate, or we can identify the depth to which our devotional practices have matured by analyzing the extent to which the mode of goodness has manifested in our life. And if we have actually cultivated and developed and become established in a life of regular sadhana practices and a cultivation of the devotional qualities of Krishna and Vaishnava Seva, and the hearing and chanting process, and also particularly the the process of preaching Krishna consciousness and Sankirtan, as Mahaprabhu ordered Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, Savatra Amaraga Koraho Prakash, that you reveal Prakash, Savatra in every place. Amaragai means my teachings. So one engaged in this activity also. One whose lifestyle is very much absorbed in these transcendental and sattvic activities, then we can recognize that is a symptom of developed Krishna consciousness, because there's no other way of developing these qualities. As Prabhupada is mentioning, in the Kali Yuga, not possible to develop these qualities in the Kali Yuga. So if these qualities are manifesting in the lifestyle of a person, then we can understand that that person has depth of Krishna consciousness. Because only by being established in Krishna consciousness can one actually get relief from the symptoms, Rajatama Bhava, Kama Lobha, the symptoms of lust and greed. They may not all disappear entirely just at one moment, or even though it would be, we would so sincerely desire such a thing. But at least there can be visible symptoms of the degrees to some significant degree. There's definite observable symptoms that the influence of these qualities has been removed, and a person is living a lifestyle which is transcendental to this type of functioning under the influence of those types of qualities like greed. And a person can be completely living in a life where he's not at all interested in possessing or accumulating or even keeping track of possessions, but simply is accepting things as they are coming in the service of the Lord without attachment to those things, the Jukta Bairagi platform. We can see that there's a very deeply established person has removed the lobha propensity from the heart. And the person, even though they may not have great possessions, but whatever they have, they're quite agreeable to giving to others and giving in charity, because they are receiving, being a saintly person, they are receiving things automatically without endeavor. So we can see that in the lives of many devotees, that their lobha has been completely, and karma also, to whatever extent we can, and this being the root desire which binds us to the material world. But the more that we can reduce our lusty propensities, then the more we can, and the reduction of the lusty propensities that will manifest as a result of depth of Krishna consciousness. Bishaya chadiya shay roshe machiya mukhe bolo hari hari. Srila Lochandas Thakur advises that mukhe bolo hari hari, by chanting the names of Lord Hari, mukhe with our mouths, shay roshe majiya, we can enter into that rosh, that bhakti rosh, that prem rosh, the loving sentiment. We can taste that by chanting the holy name and with attention. Mukhe bolo hari hari, shay roshe majiya, and by that practice, bishaya chariya, we can actually enjoy a pleasure which can help us to lose interest in the pleasures that are available in this material world. So calm, the effect of calm can be overcome by entering deep into the sadhana practices of Krishna Nam Sankirtan and Japa Jog, Mantra Japa Jog, of connecting to the Lord by mantra jap of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And in that way, one can, these are the most powerful means of establishing Nittam Bhagavat Sevaya, and these are the processes by which we can overcome Raja Tamabhava Kama Lobha Dayashchaya Chaita Eta Anavidam, can actually cleanse ourselves of these lower qualities, and this is the recommended process, which was recommended by Shukdev Goswami to the sages at Naimisharanya, as Prabhupada is here quoting, when they inquired, Buddhi Nikaramani, Shrotavyani Vibhaga, so many categories, so many things you have to hear, so many rules and regulations. Buddhi Nikaramani, Ata Sadhu Sharam, oh please, great sadhu, great holy, great kind, doyamoy, this kind, full of kindness. Ata Sadhu Trayat Sharam, what is the essence? Samudrita Munishaya, Bruhi Badraya, Bhutanam. You kindly explain that to all beings, Yanatma Shuprasiddhiti, so that we can be fully satisfied. This is the inquiry that the sages at Naimisharanya posed to Shukdev Goswami. Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami. And Sutta Goswami is explaining that the Param Dharma, the highest, which can give the ultimate Yanatma Suprasiddhiti, ultimate satisfaction for all beings, is the hearing and chanting process. Prasanna Manasa Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata. When one is fully enlivened by the Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga process, that Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam, you can fully realize the science of God. Mukta Sangasha Jayate, and is conquered over. Mukta Sangasha, over the association of material modes of nature by absorption in Krishna Bhakti, Bhagavad Bhakti. This is the process of Krishna consciousness that Sri Krishna and our acharyas are giving to us as being revealed in these teachings of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Let's conclude with these words from Srila Prabhupada. Because people have no education and actual knowledge, they become irresponsible. To stop this irresponsibility, education for developing the mode of goodness of the people in general must be there. When they are actually educated in the mode of goodness, they will become sober, in full knowledge of things as they are. Then people will be happy and prosperous. Even if the majority of the people aren't happy and prosperous, if a certain percentage of the population develops Krishna consciousness and becomes situated in the mode of goodness, then there is the possibility of peace and prosperity all over the world. Srila Prabhupada ki